everybody, I'm Deborah with DC Fine Art. And today we are going to working with a bold bright blue paper for a color pencil piece. Now this bright blue paper that I have is a MEWE Tints, and it's a pastel paper, but they had a super bright blue and some other bold colors that I went ahead and picked up. And I'll be going over the pros and cons to working with a really bold color. Now I know I did on one of my past videos a pastel piece, and I chose the wrong color for what I was wanting to get out of the piece. But this time I wanted to see what would happen if you used color pencil, and with it being a different medium, how that would react to using it on a really bold, bright color like this blue. I mean, it's like really, really blue. And also, if you're working with color pencil and you have all these sheets of paper, I usually only go to the size of like 11 by 14. And for some reason, here we go again, I picked up a 20 by 16 and decided to try this experiment out with doing a piece on. And I really should have picked a smaller, like 11 by 14 or less, in order to do a color pencil piece, because this one here took forever. And it wasn't even, I would have to say that I kind of rushed through it just a little bit, just so that way I can kind of get some of this done with our experimenting. And also I wanted to keep in mind that the paper, I went ahead and used the smooth side when doing the color pencil pieces, anything on the MEWE Tints. So I don't want to use the rough side. I end up using the smoother side, or the back side of the paper. And also I wanted to give a big shout out to all my subscribers. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. I know that I am new to YouTube, so still trying to get used to these videos, and I know with time I will get better videos and we'll start progressing on them. So I do appreciate every single one of you guys, and it means the world to me to have you guys follow along on my art journey. And also, if you're new to this channel, remember to click the like and subscribe, and click the little bell notification. That way YouTube can remind you of my new videos that I have posted, since I do post, well, I've been posting on Wednesdays and Thursdays so far, but you never know, I might throw in a bonus video or something, you know, one of these days, and it'll be like on a different day than the normal day. So that would always be nice to have that little notification to let you know when I do that. And in my videos, I like to focus on trying out new techniques, new tips, different mediums, and also trying out new ideas, and also testing out new products. All right, now let's go ahead and continue on with this painting, and hopefully no more traffic interruptions. All right, now with the sky, whenever I was doing my layering with the color pencils, I worked my way from lightest to darkest, of course, and the lighter color is actually a cobalt, like a light cobalt blue. And whenever I put it on the paper, it almost came out looking like a white. So it's a good thing I was working with the sky, because in the sky you go from lightest to darkest, and even if you do have a little bit of a whitish color in it, skies do have whites for clouds or steam, or, you know, that mist kind of look. But whenever I was doing it, it really did stand out quite a bit. But I went from my lightest to my darkest. I think it was like light cobalt blue to a medium ultramarine, and then, like, you know, a little bit darker as it goes up. And the only problems that I could see is whenever I was using a blue that was really super, like the darkest blue that was super closest to the blue of the paper, it almost matched it. So it was kind of hard to kind of see where that blue was, and whenever I was blending on exactly, you know, what I blended and what I didn't blend, unless I like shined it in a light and could kind of see a little bit of a glare to where I still needed to blend. So doing blue on blue was kind of a little bit hard there to try and see as far as seeing it. But in all reality, it wasn't too bad working with this type of paper when you're working with blue skies. So the light colored parts, like the ultramarine or the light blue, came out looking more like a smoky color right behind the rocks and the boulders of the scene. It's like a desert scene. So it wasn't too bad on that, I would say. If I had to give it like a 1 to 10 on it, I would definitely probably rate it as like maybe a 60%, like a 6%. I don't know. You could go to a 7, but I wouldn't give it a perfect 10 for skies, because if it was a little bit lighter colored paper blue, then it probably would have worked out a little bit better in my favor. But I wouldn't rule it out. I would not rule it out. So, and I only put maybe like 2 layers on this, is all I really did. And the way I count my layers is by adding pigment to the paper. I know I usually say this all the time, but just for anybody who's new, whenever I add my pigment to the paper, I'll go back over it several times, getting enough pigment on the paper before I actually go with my own mess. I'll blend that out, and then once after I blend it out and let it dry, I count that as 1, and then I'll add more pigment and then blend it out again, and that's number 2 on layers. That's how I count it. If I counted each and every pencil stroke over it, that would be way too many layers to count. So I kind of do it the easy way. And here you'll kind of see me kind of rush through this. I know usually whenever you do a color pencil piece, you want to take your time and do smaller circles and really fill in the tooth of the paper. And with this one here, since I was kind of just rushing just kind of see what it was like through the paper, I kind of rushed through on the sky. I know I can add another layer to it, but I kind of didn't. I only did like 2 layers is all I did for the top of the sky, which it could have actually went 3 to 4 layers on it before it, if I wanted it, perfect without no, lines or anything kind of streaky looking. But I was really kind of happy with it whenever I got through. I was like, okay, this will work, it's a good experiment, and if I need to, I can always make little minor adjustments and go back to it. But I really did pick out a really big piece of paper, 20 by 16, unless you want to spend a really, really long time on this piece, then you could. But if you're trying to do something like me, where I'm trying to make a video and kind of experiment and go over stuff, I really shouldn't have picked a 20 by 16. I don't know what I was thinking, but we are definitely winging it. And now I'm starting on the rocks here, and I was trying to put in like just little details and like just anything I could think of just to kind of work in some different colors into this piece, whether it's some darker grays or some lighter grays. I worked with several different colors, and since this piece is supposed to be like out in the desert, they have these either bleached out rocks from the sun, and then they also have these really red rocks too. I know they have them in like New Mexico and Arizona. They got these really pretty red rocks. So I kind of wanted to do a mixture of different rock colors, because I also wanted to see what it would look like on the blue, bright blue, bold color or paper. And so I wasn't really expecting it to turn out to be like the greatest piece of all time or anything like that, but it does give me a sense of what colors or color pencils I can use and what the blue paper is going to do with that color. Either it's going to make it super brighter than what it is, or maybe it might make it look a little bit muddier looking. I mean, it's no way of really telling until you just jump right in and test out this paper and the color and the medium that you're using and just see what it's like. So, and if any of you guys are like new to my videos, I do some experiments. So I experiment kind of like this on different paper colors, different maybe supplies that are new that I found and wanted to try them out. I also do just full pieces either different mediums. So I do like working in different mediums. So yeah, this is what my videos are about, is just to kind of exploring and learning along the way too, because I know if you guys are new and you don't know how to like do some of these color pencil pieces, you know, I'm here to kind of help you on those too. So I do have different videos that I come out, and I like to explore different aspects and different views and just trying new things out, because I know a lot of artists stick to, you know, doing just one thing and that's it. But I kind of want to explore different things, you know, trying out new things, expanding your imagination. So that's one thing that I have fun with. And if it ends up being something that I'm like, oh my gosh, this piece here that I've done is a total bust, you know, at least, even if it is a total bust, and I mean, it's different views on that, whether it is or not, but I'm hoping that to get out of that is something that maybe you guys might be able to see and be like, okay, maybe I don't want to do it like that. Maybe I had that idea, but yeah, I'm not going to do it now, since, especially if you tried it on a 20 by 16, yeah, then you definitely don't want to, you'll probably be like, no thank you, I'm not going to do that. Wrong choice. A lot of hard work. But so far with the rocks, on doing these with the color pencils, it took on a blue tone. As you can see, it's much cooler. It has a cooler look to it. So if you're wanting something that's super bright and pops out there, or you want those rocks to really, really stand out, then doing it on a blue paper, it would not be a good choice. So if you're wanting it to look more cooled, like cooled down, and I say cooled down because it gives that blue tone to everything. So at least so far on the rocks, it's been given the blue tone. And then you want to go with this if you like that, if that's what you're going for. But in this piece so far, it still worked. I mean, it looks decent, and I know I'm rushing through it, so everything's not going to be perfect on this piece. Like I said, it's not going to come out looking probably like one of the best pieces I've ever done, but it is something that I'm hopefully, you know, am getting across to see what this paper does. So I have been going over this, let's see here, the rock, at least this rock here, I just really kind of honed in on it, and then I started thinking to myself after working on this rock, I was like, what am I doing? This piece is really, it's supposed to be a rock that's in the distance, and if you're working on something that's in the distance, basically you're not going to have all that detail that you would with something closer up. So whenever I started putting in a lot of these detail, I was like thinking, okay, what do I need? I need to stop doing this and start just kind of backing away with some of the detail that I was adding into it, because I can get carried away and put detail into just about everything I want to work on. But in this case, I really shouldn't have put as much detail into the rocks as I did, but I just went ahead and did a kind of, I would say, intermediate or just mediocre, kind of like pushing some detail in there, and then kind of stopped myself from putting that much toward the bottom and the rocks, like whenever I start working into more of the rocks. But the colors on this, like I said, just kind of the same thing with the sky. If you're working with a lighter blue, it'll come out looking like white. If you're working with a light steel gray, it's going to come out looking like a white. So, I mean, it really does, you know, make those pop. When blending with my OMS on your first coat, you are definitely going to have that blue showing through. So in order to try and cover up as much of that blue as you can, you could go over it several times in order to make the color stand out more. But if you're wanting to actually have that cool blue tone effect like in the distance, then maybe after using your OMS and you go back over it one more time, maybe that's all you want to do, so that way you can keep some of that blue, because it does add good shadows. It does give you that cooler tone for something that's further back, further away from you. So that does work. And I could really see in this and doing this piece, if you were to do like a underwater piece with like fish and sea animals and, you know, just something fun, you know, if you want to do something like that that's more like an underwater kind of thing, I could really see this paper working out very, very well for that, because you've got that blue tone to it, like that cool underwater look to it. So it would really work out perfect, I would think, because it's got that cool tone to it. So this paper definitely is good for some things. And like the thing that I'm doing right now with this desert scene, still working on it, but I mean, it could work too. It's just going to give you a totally different effect than if I were to take out more of a tan toned or a lighter tan tone color. Then it would make those rocks look more, I should say more realistic, should I say. I hate to say that, but more realistic. It would be able to make some of your, you know, your colors, like your darks, dark enough where it pops out, and then whenever you're working with your lighter colors, it will definitely make those adjusted to where you can pick up maybe a steel gray, use it, and it's toned down enough to where when you add your white pencil on top, that could be your brightest color. But with this piece, it's like almost like your steel gray pops out as being almost like a white. I mean, it really does. So I don't know, it's all about your taste, I guess, on what you're doing and what you're wanting it to come out to look like. And sometimes I found it whenever I was like putting in the darker colors or like any of the darker shadows, like with the black or a blue, like a dark indigo color. And if you end up blending it out and then going over it again, sometimes if you're doing that in between like two rocks, I notice that sometimes you'll miss some of that blue, and the blue will still happen to find its way to shine through, and then you're like trying to go back over it, trying to not to miss some of those, that really bright blue that's coming through. So you definitely want to keep your eye out on that. I know when working with something that's really super bold and you're trying to get that coverage, definitely it's a good thing to work a little slower, trying to get those areas covered in to where you fill it in. Otherwise you might have between a black part or a dark part in your painting compared to another one. You might, like, let's just say an example, it'd probably be easier that way. If you have like in between the cracks of the rock and you have it super dark, and then the rock next to it has light shining on it with a brighter color, you may end up having this little sliver of blue kind of like poking through. It's sometimes it manages to find its way through. So you definitely want to work slower and get that coverage that you're needing. So it is a little bit more time consuming trying to cover if you're trying to cover up that blue, to get every little inch and little piece of it. You have to take more time in doing that, rather than if you were to work on, let's just say, that tan tone paper, like I said, and if the tan tone shows through on rocks, you're not going to notice it. I mean, it's not really going to be noticeable at all. So having some of that paper shine through on something like that, it's fine. You know, it's not noticeable. It goes with what you're working with. But if you're trying to cover and get everything completely covered, and you don't want that blue to shine through, or a different color, if you were to use red or yellow or whatever it is, you know, it's going to be a little bit more time consuming trying to get every little piece covered. So, and where you don't want that to shine through, like really bold. So more time consuming. So that would be another thing. So definitely is more time consuming. Now, I noticed as I was like starting to kind of get away from the other rocks and started working on some of these smaller ones, the amount of time was even less that I kind of spent on them. I just kind of zoomed through them, put in my lights and my darks, and put in my different variation of colors to give it that look of texture. But as I was doing that and kind of went over them more quickly and kind of did one coat over them, I started to notice that I was getting more of that look that I kind of wanted, where it was more pushed back in the background instead of being so detailed and so far up front. So with it having more of that blue kind of standing out, giving it that look of being in the distance and being cooler, and not putting so many layers on it and letting that paper kind of show through a little bit, it actually gave it a more like further back tone, like a cooler tone that I actually looked really good, like it was more pushed further back. So on a note that I would say, if you are using something that's really bold or anything like that, like this color of paper, and you wanted it to look more further in the distance, doing maybe like one really good layer, which means putting down plenty of your pigment before you actually blend it out, and kind of smoothing it over. If you want to go back over it, just minor bits to show in your little highlights maybe on some of the rocks, but just doing it that way where it's like one solid good layer on it with a little bit maybe on top. Pretty much that's all you really need to kind of push it back into the background. The more you keep adding to it, the more pigment you start adding, and the more layers you get, the more it starts to stand out a little bit stronger. It still has that blue cool down tone effect, but it's more closer to you. It feels like it's more closer to you. So I noticed by working with this, if you were to just do one coat and let that blue paper shine through, it actually pushes it further back. It gives it that cooler look, like if it's further off in the distance, like a little bit further off. So learning experience here too on working with something this bold. I've never done anything like on a paper, that was, hey, way out there, but I noticed that by letting some of that paper shine through, it really did add a cool effect to it. Literally a cool one. And here you can see me, I just kind of highlighted the top of the little rocks that are down at the bottom. And these rocks I actually really loved. And then I put a little bit of a darker shade, like a darker sepia, right around the edges of the rocks that kind of add in the shadow. And then I started working on the sandy part of the scene that had more of that desert light look. And I was using for the sandy colors more of my Derwent drawing pencils, because they are softer and you can get a lot more pigment out of it, and whenever you're blending it, it covers a whole lot more. And I noticed that I actually really liked the tone, like how it was pushing through there. And then I went ahead and just kind of doodled this like little mini Joshua tree, like it's a little baby one in the back. It's like a little palm. Looks like a little palm, but I think that's what the little Joshua trees look like when they first start out. And whenever I doodled him in there and doodled a rock in there, just kind of quickly kind of put it in there. I noticed that I should have done that probably after I went ahead and put that first layer down or the second layer down, just so that way it was a little bit more easier to get and blend right around the limbs and the little pine needles that come out of it. But since it's pushed back in the distance and this is my first layer, I just went ahead and blended it out, and I blended out the little rock. And even though it looks like a little blob right there, that just kind of like when you're doing an underpainting, it kind of you got that background color to it, and then you just add to it from there. Then you start making your details. So as that's drying and letting my OMS dry, I'm going back over these rocks. And this is where I kind of spent less time on the rocks, and it actually looked better because the blue kind of shined through and gave it that push back in the distance feel to it, just the way I was wanting it. So if I had to do things a little differently, I probably would have spent a little bit less time on my rocks with putting in as much as I did. That way it kind of pushed it further back into the background. So I really did like my rocks that turned out on the bottom there, that look. And now I'm just kind of adding a little bit more detail to my rock. This right there, it's like a little red rock. And I'll end up adding more of the red tone or reddish toned rock in there. But it was just to kind of see what it would look like with the color and the blue shining through with that red or the reddish rock. And so far what I see, it really pops out. I mean, it really stands out on that blue. So you have no problem whatsoever with that reddish tone popping through. So there I am, kind of blending out these little background rocks. And I really liked how that looked whenever I got through blending it out, kind of pushing those rocks back. And also wanted to let you know, whenever you are blending with OMS with this picture, it's going to be darker. As you can tell, whenever it gets wet, it gets dark, and you're thinking, oh my god, I washed it completely out. That's really not how it's going to look when it dries. It actually dries, it brightens back up. So that's another note. Even though you're washing it over with your OMS and blending it out, it will brighten up when it dries out. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more detail to my rock and my pine, and then I'll go back through on those rocks right behind it that's in the distance there, the little ones, because they're drying out. And there I am adding in some of the little highlights to some of the tips of the rocks, just so they stand out a little bit. Now here, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom through this. This here is the sand part. The top portion of it, I added a couple more, like another layer to it, and just kind of went over it to strengthen it up a little bit. And this bottom layer here, I'm using nothing but the Derwent drawing pencils. They're super soft. Like I said, you can lay down a bunch of pigment on the paper to where whenever you blend it out, it blends out really nicely. It's like, you know, it doesn't really wash completely away or anything like that. I mean, it really does an amazing job, especially if you're working with such a large painting like I am. You know, I picked out this 20 by 16, and if I were to use like these little bitty circles and working all this time trying to add in my background layer with the Caran d'Ache or any of those, it would take a lot longer than it would with me not using my Derwent drawing. My Derwent drawing speeds things up, especially for as big of a piece as this one is. Now here I'm just going with, like, whenever I'm doing the sand, I started out with more of a lighter color, of a sandy color, and then I worked my way down, adding a little darker color and then transitioning to even a darker color. So the bottom of the picture is going to be darker than then basically the farther back you go, I went lighter. So I'm adding in my darks and kind of adding in some of my highlights on top of that. And then I'm going back with like a chocolate, I think it's called chocolate, of the Derwent drawing to kind of add in an even darker look to it. I was like, okay, I need to darken this up a little bit more. And so that way you got the transition from light to dark the closer you get to the picture. So that way, whenever I do go back and I work on my zebra and the things that I really want to stand out the most, it will stand out a lot better. So that's what my goal is to make sure that the main focus of this painting, the zebra and the little cactus flower that's actually in the bottom right hand corner, stands out a lot more than the background. So I didn't really want to put too much time into the background. Plus that really big piece, it would have never gotten done or undone. I don't even think that's even a word. But it wouldn't have been done in time, like for me getting this video out there to you guys. So here I am blending with the OMS, and I'm working my way from the lightest part to the darkest part. The darkest part I really want to do last, so that way I'm not kind of oversaturating it and putting darks into the lights. So I wanted to keep those kind of separate when blending. And this blends out really nice. It gives a really nice painterly look, which I really did. I love the look it gave to this. And there I'm kind of going around that cactus flower that we will be doing in part 2 of this video. So that will be coming out next week. We'll be working with the zebra and the cactus flower and see what happens when we start adding in some other tone colors to this piece and see what the blue does. So that blue background, let's see what happens whenever we start working with the cactus flower and a zebra and using those whites and those darks and the blacks and even some reds for the cactus flower or oranges. We'll see how it looks. And all right, here's my finished piece that I've got done with part 1. Part 2, we'll be working on the zebra and the cactus flower, working on this bright blue bold color paper, and we'll see what happens. Also, if you could click the like and subscribe, and also hit the little bell notification little icon so that way YouTube can notify you whenever I have a next video, and hope to see you all again next time. Bye everyone.